Welcome at Connecting Expertise, a new coffee corner. And I'm super thrilled actually to invite Jochen Moerman to the stage. My name is Matthias van Immer and I'm working at Connecting Expertise. And today we have Jochen, who is an HR legal expert, who's also an reward strategy expert. And for me, really curious also about co-CEO at Hukaroi. Hukaroi is one of the partners from the Partner Network, an initiative that we launched earlier, 2 months ago. So I would say, Jochen, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're also super happy that you could be here. And today we're going to talk about pay equity. Pay equity is a hot topic. We know pay equity in gender. I think that's the most known one. But today we're going to talk about pay equity between employees and contractors and freelancers.
Yeah, indeed, Matthias. Once again, glad to be here at the Coffee Corner of Connecting Expertise. Glad to be a partner, of course, of Connecting Expertise as well. So indeed, gender pay gap is one of the hottest topics when you talk about pay equity. But today we're going to talk about pay equity between freelancers and employees, or contractors, owner-account workers, and there are different terms for the notion of freelancer.
Because more and more people are also starting to go freelance. Yeah. And as a company, also from that perspective, you need to make sure that you at some way can attract those people, important, engage those people and make sure that they stay at the company, because also a freelancer can have the feeling that he's treated unfairly. Compared to the employees. So if I can already try to recap a little bit on what we've been saying, so like get the basics right. That's a first important step that we need to do. Also, I want to invite people who are watching right now. You can ask questions. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send them into the chat, and then we can ask them to Jochen, because then we can start a discussion. Would be really great. I think we can, already when we're waiting to the questions, we can look at the next thing that we wanted to discuss. And if I don't mistaken myself, you have also some images that you wanted to share, right?
Yeah, correct.
So
that's a bit the idea indeed. So we have the equity at the basis, which are the demotivators. If we zoom in, what lies underneath behind equity, then you have basically 4 pillars. You have the distributive equity, or fairness, or organizational justice. There are different notions for it. You have the procedural fairness, you have informational fairness, and you have interactional fairness. So distributive fairness is...
These are the 4 pillars that we see here.
Yeah, indeed. So distributive fairness has 2 components: external, internal. External, am I being paid correctly when I compare myself to the market? Internal, am I being paid correctly when I look at the internal organization? Procedural is about, am I being treated, do I have trust in the procedures? For instance, promotion, hiring processes. And if you look at, for instance, employees versus freelancer, you see often in companies that you have 2 tracks. So a business track for the freelancer and an HR track for the employees. And the business track goes a lot faster, very often, than the HR track. So there you have a certain unfairness. And there are cases where people first apply for the job as an employee, and they say, okay, but they also search for a contractor, more or less the same function, let's apply for that one. And the second one goes a lot faster. So you see unfairness in that procedural aspect.
Because this is really interesting, what you're saying, because if we look back and we think about an employee who's a solid base for your company and who's already gonna work a long time for your company, also that's not always true, of course. But then you would think that a company actually would take really care of the employees in a matter of fact, and especially try to grow the company with the employees.
Yeah, in a certain way that's true, because they're more strict in their hiring procedures, so they want to make sure that they hire the right person, whereas for freelancers it goes a lot faster, because Freelancers are also more volatile, more flexible, and so on.
And you need to be fast as a company
Yeah.
to attract a freelancer. If we look to the time to hire between an employee and a freelancer, the difference there is crazy.
Yeah, but you can have certain procedural unfairness there. Another example of procedural unfairness is the employee gets invited for the personnel
for the Christmas party,
and
the exclusive Christmas
the
party.
freelancers don't. So that may be felt unfair. So that's the procedural part. Interactional is, am I being treated with respect? So that's a very basic one. Informational is, do I get all the information? Is certain information withheld from me? And that's also a very important one.
Like an employee can log on to the intranet to find all the details, and the freelancers don't get access to the intranet.
Yeah, for instance, or certain information asymmetry when it's about how am I being paid, how are the employees being paid, and so on. Is certain information shared or not? That may come over as unfair.
Because if we talk about payments, an employee gets paid at the end of the month. A freelancer sends his invoice. Maybe it takes 2 weeks, maybe it takes a month, maybe even longer.
Yeah, true.
That's also a frustration of freelancers.
Yeah, indeed. So that's also part of the procedural unfairness, I would say.
Okay.
But indeed, that's indeed a part of the entire unfairness or fairness spectrum. But today, in fact, we're going to focus on the pay equity, so the distributive part. So that's really our focus. Now, we already discussed that equity, the foundation. It's very important to have that one straight, because if it's not sound, the foundation, then people will take action, and worst case, they will leave the company. Same goes, for instance, for employees who say to the company, well, I would like to work on a freelance basis from now on. Is that a possibility? And very often we see in companies that companies don't tend to react positively on that request, which, if the employee wants to be a freelancer, he will be a freelancer, only not at that company.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying as a company you have to motivate people to work as a self-employed worker, but you can facilitate it. That's a huge difference, of course.
Because from your perspective, why don't companies like the fact that somebody is becoming a self-employed?
That's a difficult one. There are several reasons, perhaps, because employees tend to be more steady workforce compared to freelancers. Also, freelancer may be a bit may have a negative connotation in the fact that they are very flexible, and they want to be very flexible, and so on. So that they won't stay a long time from the company.
Is this true?
Well, I don't have the numbers. I'm not sure. If you look at employees as well, you see that tenure is less and less long compared to yesteryears, because you had people who worked 20, 30 years for a company. Now people, even as an employee, don't work 20 years.
No, because if you look at the labor market, if it's an employee or a freelancer, you need to treat people well. Otherwise, they leave either way.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the same as an employee or a freelancer. You have to treat people in a fair way. You have to differentiate yourself as a company. You have to make sure that people know why they choose for that company to work, and those motives are quite comparable if you look at employees or freelancers, self-employed workers. So people choose a certain company from whom they want to work. And something I saw on LinkedIn recently was the war on talent is over, the talent won. And that's regardless of social status, employee or freelancer. And that's a bit the thing. Actually, freelance or social status should be irrelevant, in fact. But we see, for instance, also that freelancers are hired more in not the core processes of a company, than employees, for instance, which
Yeah.
is not unlogical, of course. Yeah, that's the matter of perception indeed.
Yeah.
So do freelancers compare themselves to employed workers and vice versa? They do. So there's always someone to compare with. For instance, if you have an employee who wants to be a freelancer, they can compare themselves to other freelancers, but they can also compare themselves to their own person, because they were an employee, and they say, well, okay, I want to be a freelancer, but this is the net salary that I need each month. So give me a freelance fee that with which I can foresee in my net monthly income. The same goes for you see that in certain companies, and a lot of companies, in fact, that if you get a promotion at a certain level, typically executive management and so on, you are self-employed. So you want to make a promotion, so actually you want to make more, so you have to be able to compare those two, the salary which you took home as an employee and the salary which you will take home as a self-employed worker.
And I'm looking, because I'm looking also a little bit at the timing. And that's maybe a really nice way to bridge to something we've discussed about, the equitable earnings framework. So please enlighten us about this concept, Jochen.
Yeah, so basically it's a framework we developed with Hukaroi. And basically it was in 2022 where we had the question from a company, the listed company, who said, okay, well, people need to have it concrete what the net salary will be that they'll take home, not only at the end of the month or the end of the year, but also when they retire. And as you know, the net spendable income of the tax legislation and parafiscal legislation is completely different for employees and self-employed workers. Pension as well, of course. But they wanted to have all those actors in an equilibrium, and also make sure that people can foresee in the professional expenses. For executive directors, it's quite okay. So the first two are more important: net spendable income each month, and the retirement pension. They will receive the net capital, because it's all about net. The company didn't really care about the cost, insofar that the cost could not increase, but that's about it. So the cost is not a factor in the equation. So we really had to look at net, and that's also the most fair that you can do. Because, for instance, if you look at cost, which is very common, if you look at the market, people or companies calculate the cost of salary of a certain employee. I typically times 1392, and then the Social Security tax contributions on behalf of the employer, and then you have a cost of salary, and then you divide it by the number of work days per year, which is quite tricky, of course, because that's a certain cost perspective, but you can have other cost perspectives as well, because that's a gross cost. But what do you do if the company has fiscal or other subsidies for a certain person? Typically R&D subsidies. So actually the actual cost of the employer, of the company, is not the gross cost, is not the monthly salary times 1392 plus the Social Security tax contributions, but it's less. So will you take the lesser cost as basis? Because that's a bit unfair towards the person, because he cannot help himself that the company gets subsidies for him. So it's a bit weird. Also, actually you have to take into account the cost of employment, which is broader than the cost of salary, because you also have to see, okay, what's total cost of ownership of a company car, what's the payroll cost, what's the training cost, so you get a very broad perspective on cost. It's very difficult.
What happens when somebody gets sick?
Indeed, yeah. So that's also things that you have to take into account. That the Social Security benefit part is also completely different. So not only pension, but also guaranteed income and so on. what happens then. And so that's a bit why the cost doesn't work, and also I don't think that individuals lie awake of the cost of the employer, in fact. Also, I don't think that quite sure, that most employees don't know what they actually cost to the company. Even companies don't always know what an employee exactly costs to them, because it's a very diverse, the cost. It's all different segments.
Because that's also a question I have. Because if we're talking about the cost, it can you can tend to think it's easy to compare them, but apparently it's not.
You could compare them cost-wise. That's possible, but then you will always have the point where an employee is subsidized, and the self-employed worker will be penalized because, as an employee, the company is subsidized. So that's a bit weird. So you don't have a uniform cost concept, in fact. Plus, the individual doesn't really care about the cost as such. Second part is that companies tend to look at the market, and they say, well, okay, if we have to see what a fair freelance fee is, we will look at others, what they do. And that's about benchmarking. It may provide answers, but not to the question of equity, because you will compare freelancers with freelancers, and still you won't have an answer on, okay, how does that compare the freelance fee with the salary of an employee? So that took us to, okay, we will have to go to a net perspective. And we have to see what the net income is that an employee earns on a short-term basis, typically monthly or yearly, and what net income from the pension the employee will realize, so in the long term.
Especially in the beginning of a career of a freelancer, this is not taken into account for him as well, him or she as well.
Indeed.
Right, Jochen, we're gonna, because you also had another slide that showed the complexity of this. So I would suggest that we go through this one, and then it's time for questions. So I again want to invite people, if you have questions, really this is the time. Send them in the chat or to one of my colleagues direct, they will get to me. Voilà, Jochen, so you can discuss this.
So basically the philosophy behind the equitable earnings framework is that you have those three factors. You have to have the same net income each month on the short term. You have to have the same net income when you retire, and you have to be able to foresee your professional expenses. And so in step one, we will calculate the cost. So we will do that, but just to see that the cost does not increase. That's the only thing we do with the cost. Secondly, we go to what's the net income of the employee with whom the freelancer can be compared with, or a group of employees for comparison matters. And then we will look at what's the long-term net income, both statutory pension and extra-legal, so supplementary pension, second and third pillar. And then we have a net on the long term, a net on the short term. And then we say, okay, well, what's the minimum yearly fee, yearly remuneration that the self-employed worker should earn in order to realize the net income on the short term, the net income on the long term, and to make sure that he can finance his professional expenses. So that's the whole idea. And of course, that's a very complex matter, and for such calculation, you need to have an algorithm which can take into account millions and millions of scenarios that should be compared to one another in order to see, okay, what income do we have to take here each year, gross income then? Of course, the answer is not one magical number. The answer is in fact a spectrum, because as you know, and each self-employed worker knows this, they will optimize their income.
Fiscal optimization,
Indeed.
if you have a good accountant.
Indeed. So it depends actually on the eagerness and the aggressiveness of the self-employed worker, how the net income will be attained. Because if they have an aggressive tax optimization style, they will need a lower gross yearly fee to realize that net income. If they are more careful, they will need a higher gross earning each year. And that's...
And Jochen, with aggressive, you mean like taking risks?
Taking risks, indeed, with a lot of risk appetite, and let's go for it, and then make sure that we optimize everything in the picture. And then you have a spectrum, of course, a spectrum of on what term do I want to realize this this income? Can I take more risk? Do I have more risk appetite? Then I can postpone it to 5 years, so horizon 5, or horizon 1. If you want to have your net income faster, you will be taxed more heavily. If you can wait, you will be taxed less. So that's the horizon. So we have a horizon between 1 and 5, between which your gross yearly income will vary. And then you have to recalculate that towards a daily fee, in fact. And that's typically step 4, where we see, okay, will we need to take social corrections into account? That's typically based on the company, on the view of the company. It's okay, what we will do if people get sick, because most self-employed workers, they have coverage for that, but only if they're sick for more than 30 days. And the company says, well, okay, if a self-employed worker or freelancer gets sick with us, we want to make sure that it's calculated in their fee, meaning that the yearly amount will be spread across less days per year, so that daily fee per year daily fee will increase slightly. And then you have a spectrum of, in this case, for example, between 500 and 550 approximately, and that's a bit the spread that you have. And that's the basis of all. It's a framework that's based on principles. So, and that's the strength of this such kind of our framework. Could be another framework as well. It's about principles. You can disagree on the criteria, on the assumptions. You cannot disagree with the outcome. And basically, when you agree with the assumption, that's the outcome, and that often is perceived as fair. Because if I may, we had a case where there was hybrid populations of ITers, of self-employed workers and employed workers. And end of 2022, there was a huge salary increase as per 1 January 2023. So freelancers asked, well, okay, the employees, they get an increase of 11%. What do we get? And then the company turned to us and they said, okay, well, we want to do something, but we're not quite sure if we have to do something, how much we need to increase the fees of the freelancers. What's our negotiation margin, in fact? And then we applied this framework and said, okay, well, let's calculate. We operated in a black box as well, so we had no idea about the fees of the freelancers. We just had ideas about the employees with whom we had to compare. And based on that, we came to certain fees. And the company could say, well, okay, we have taken it hard. We have calculated this, and this is the outcome. And the outcome is that you're already paid quite fairly if you compare you to an employee, and people accepted that. So, and that's the whole point of principled negotiation compared to positional bargaining, is that you have a base, so you can explain to people why you tend to hold on to a certain fee and not say, okay, well, we'll apply still 11% increase. No, they say, okay, well, based on our calculations, we think this is fair. We think this is fair as well. And that's a bit the idea. In a lot of articles, I see that it's often company versus freelancer. Freelancers should really make a stand to ask as much as possible. Companies tend to pay as less as possible. I don't think this is true. I think companies will pay a fair fee, and freelancers will expect a fair fee. And one of the biggest issues of company is that or challenges is that they have to hold on to their strategy. And without a principled negotiation framework, like our framework, the equitable earnings framework, it's very difficult to hold on to that strategy. An HR director once told me a couple of weeks ago that when it comes to employees, they pay at market level. They don't have any problem hiring or retaining people, no problem whatsoever. But when it comes to freelancers, they are the best paying company in the market, which is very weird. And that's the thing. So when it comes to freelancers, the company lets go of the strategy. And that leads to unfairness.
If they already have a strategy, of course.
Yeah, they do. They have a very sound strategy, but it's difficult to put it into practice when you do that for freelancers. And that's the strength of a framework like the equitable earnings framework, is that you have a basis for principled negotiations. And the thing is, it's not that if you pay people differently, it won't be perceived as unfair necessarily if you have a good explanation for it.
Yeah.
And that's the whole idea behind what and why we do it.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. Already, thank you for all the information. Yeah, we've received a question here. So let me check. So yeah, if a freelancer actually has the opportunity, will he or she not go work for, to put it really bluntly, the highest bidder?
Yeah, that's typically a question that we get because you can say indeed, well, as a company we will hold on to our strategy, and we don't care about the market. So it's not that black-white, of course. It's a bit more gray. First of all, if you look at employees, it's not that the employee will per se work for the highest paying company. It's broader than that. Pay is one element in the whole package. It's also about flexibility. It's about culture. It's about a lot of things in the equation, and not just about pay. So that's the first. The thing is that companies that invest less in cash payments, they invest in other things, and things that really matter to the strategy. And that's the whole point. If, for instance, Colruyt, who business-wise makes a difference by saying, well, we have the lowest prices, if they are the best paying company, the best paying employer, that would be weird. In fact, because it doesn't match with their business strategy, so that has to match. And people perceive that as authentic, as genuine. So it's not that if you are not the best paying company that you won't that you won't be able to hire and retain talent. I don't think that's the case. I think people sign up for more than just cash pay.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, this is also an interesting one. So we've discussed the framework. Does this also determine of course the freelance fees? But does it also reduce actually the freedom of the freelancer to set their own fee?
That's something.
Because it's also it's a little bit the same as the previous question, and I think it's also really interesting. And like you also said, it's like an employee, they take also in account culture, all the other stuff, but of course their time to hire is longer than for the freelancer. Freelancers sometimes have 1 or 2 meetings, done deal, and let's go. So they don't even know about culture.
Yeah, well, when it comes to about the freedom to negotiate.
Yeah, exactly. That was the question. Thank you.
That's something sometimes a remark. And then you would increase the risk of sham self-employment. So that's the whole idea, of course, and also procedural. You have to see that there's still a legal framework that you have to take into account. You cannot you can say, well, self-employed workers and employed workers are the same for me. Yes, more or less, but still you have to take into account the legal framework, and you have to take into account the risk of sham self-employment. But by applying a certain framework, doesn't increase the risk of sham self-employment, because it's just a framework for your principled negotiation. That's about it, which we mostly develop for companies, which may also apply for self-employed workers, because we get a lot of questions for self-employed workers as well. Is that, okay, well, I was an employee, what should my fee be exactly? Because, and that's a question a lot of accountants cannot answer as well, because then you have to calculate with the algorithm, okay, what are all the scenarios, what's your risk appetite, and so on. So it's a framework which is in fact in the middle between the self-employed worker, the freelancer, the contractor, and the company, in fact. And around that framework, people can negotiate. And if the freelancer says, well, okay, I don't agree with the framework or whatever, I want a higher fee, okay, fine.
Yeah.
And he just goes to another company, then that's perfectly fine. So it's agree to disagree.
Wow, super interesting. Yeah, Jochen, thank you very much to be here, to enlighten us with this topic, and to give us some ideas also how we can try to calculate it ourselves, if I can say so, but then also realize it's nearly impossible to do this. Also for everyone, thank you for watching. It was great that you've been here. This session is recorded, so you will find it on YouTube sooner or later. Either way, we will send you an email. Also, our next coffee corner, we will also inform you via email when, where, and with who the next coffee corner will be. If you have, in the meanwhile, questions also for Jochen, we will add his LinkedIn somewhere so you can find it as well. And then I just want to conclude with saying, really big thank you for following this coffee corner. Jochen, thank you. And I will say, let's grab an espresso somewhere to celebrate this. Thank you very much.